Okay, welcome online students. Today we're going to take a look at some grammar and we're going to work on apostrophes, okay? So right now, if you have your books handy, again this will be in the modules and the assignment sections. Later you can check to see what pages. But right now we're looking at page 213 in the grammar handout book. All right, so apostrophes. And this is something that a lot of native speakers have problems with as well. And the first thing I want to talk about is the uses of apostrophes. So if you're looking on page 213, it says apostrophes have three main uses: to make nouns and indefinite pronouns possessive, to make contractions, and to make a few special plurals, okay? Because what really makes me crazy when I see native speakers do this, okay, for example, here's book, right? That's a singular noun. So what's the plural of book? It's very easy, right? Books, okay? But sometimes people do this. It makes me crazy. This is not the plural of books, right? It's something like, this is a possession of the books, for example, or of the book. For example, I didn't understand the book's ending, right? So it's the possession of the book, the ending of the book. So never do this to show a plural. Ooh, makes me crazy. All right, so the first type of use of apostrophes we're going to take a look at is possession. All right, so in English, it says here, we often but not always have a choice of way to show possession with noun. We can use of the and say the courage of the fireman, or we can use an apostrophe plus s and say the fireman's courage. So I know in many languages you don't have, raise your hand if in your language you have something like this to show possession. Does this work in your language? Like some kind of a contraction to show? Anybody? Okay, in Farsi you do? Any other language? No, probably not. So you know, most, like for example in Spanish, how do you show possession? How do you show possession? Like car. In English we say Karen's car, right? But how do we say it in Spanish? But don't say it in Spanish, but translate it into English.
My car?
No, but Karen.
Oh, Karen.
Yeah.
The car of Karen?
Right. You know, in many languages you have to do it like this way. The courage of the fireman. You have to do like not the Karen of car, right? The car of Karen. All right, well, we don't really do that in English. We have the ability to show possession with apostrophe s. Okay, so instead of the car of Karen, what do we say?
Karen's car.
Karen's car, right? Karen's car. All right, so let's take a look again. The speed of the runner, we can say that, but then we do the runner's speed, etc. Okay. Now, it says we use an apostrophe or an apostrophe plus s more often when the owner is a living being, and we use the of phrase more often when the owner is a non-living thing. So what does that mean? It says like the bird's wing, the bird is alive, right? The bird's wing, the dog's tail, okay, the cat's fur. But if it's something that's not alive, that's when we use of the. So the wing of the airplane. What about table? What could we say? Don't look at the example.
Oh.
What do tables have?
Legs.
Yeah, right? We say the leg of the table. We don't say the table's leg. We could, okay, or sometimes we say the table leg, but we don't put the s in there. So we say the leg of the table. All right. So if it's a living thing, it doesn't have to be a person. Like I said, the dog's tail. Then we use apostrophe s. Okay, I want to go over one more thing about when when names end in an S. Okay, so when you see something like the Smith's house, when people are talking about the Smith's house, the means Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and maybe their children, okay? But it's more than one person. So the Smiths is never going to refer to a singular person. So then we're going to have to put the apostrophe on the outside, the Smith's house. Don't put an extra S because there's no such thing as the Smiths' house, okay? So everyone understands this is plural. The Smiths, apostrophe on the outside, no S, and then the noun. But Bob Smith is one person. So Bob Smith's house, let's say he's a bachelor. He lives alone. Poor guy. We're going to put the apostrophe after the H, because that's where the name ends, Smith, and then we're going to add the S. Okay, now, let's work together. Let's say Charles lives by himself, and we're just going to use his first name rather than give him a last name. So Charles' house. How are we going to show possession for Charles? Instead of saying the house of Charles is on the corner, what do? Are we going to put it here?
No.
No, why not? That means his name is what? Charles. And there is no such name in English as Charles. So if you do this, Charles, that's the right pronunciation, but it doesn't make sense because his name is Charles. So what are we going to do to show possession?
Apostrophes.
Is this correct?
No.
No, because that would mean how many people? More than one, okay? So we need to do this, right? So if it's singular and it ends in an S and shows possession, we're going to say Charles with an apostrophe and an S. How do we pronounce this? No? Charles's. We're going to say Charles's house, okay? Maybe you'll hear people say Charles' house, but we can also, to make it clear to the listener that it's possession, Charles's house, okay? All right? In this case, we can. Charles's house, all right? There is no plural for Charles. Oh, unless it's Mr. and Mrs. Charles. Okay. Yeah, maybe there's people who are, this is their last name, the Charles, right? Okay, so, but it's not going to be Charles. I don't think anyone's going to have that name. Okay, but like here we have Mr. and Mrs. Smith. We'll have Mr. and Mrs. Charles. So if that's true, what do we do? What are we going to do? On the outside, right? The Charles. But we could also say, how are we going to pronounce it? No, we can say the Charles's house, okay? The Charles's house, even though we're not adding the S. Or we can say the Charles house. Okay, it doesn't matter. All right? How many people? One. Charles's house. How many people? More than one.